Hey everyone, welcome to the Magical Stories of Healing and Spiritual Gifts podcast. I'm David, this is with my lovely wife Megan.
Hey everyone.
And we are so excited to bring you a really special guest today. Tucker Max, public speaker, New York Times bestselling author, sold millions of books, successful entrepreneur, and also recently launched a company called Scribe, which we're going to be talking about in a bit, which helps people write and publish their book. And even though he launched it, he's already working with some pretty big names, including David Goggins. So man, thanks so much for making some time for us today. This is pretty surreal for me. A lot of my buddies in the military and when I was at VMI, you're huge. You still are, but back then it was just, you were all the rage with a
Yeah,
lot of your writing. So thank you
yeah,
so
no,
much for making time.
of course, man. Happy to be on.
Awesome. Well, so to start, so the Magical, just to kind of tell you a little bit about us, the Magical Stories of Healing and Spiritual Gifts podcast, we interview people from like all over the world that have had like divine, holistic, or alternative or plant medicine-based healing experiences from disease, sickness, and trauma. I just feel like there's so much that society goes about wrong when it comes to healing. And it really excited me. I read something about, you had some healing work with a shaman and then MDMA based therapy. And we've interviewed some really interesting people that have had some similar experiences, but.
And I had an
Yeah.
ayahuasca healing. I had like horrible childhood trauma, lots of horrific things, and suppressed it. And then later I had all these mystery illnesses. I've done any kind of like conventional, obviously didn't work, did holistic, nothing worked. And ayahuasca in 2 nights, healed my PTSD. It's gone. All of my popping joints, everything's gone. So like we are huge believers in, this kind of plant medicine.
Yeah, 100%. But before we get into that with you, something I did want to note that's like always impressed me about you. And, I've been in the personal development space for over a decade now. And a lot of the people I help there's so much conditioning out there. And one of the biggest aspects of conditioning that, at least from what we've noticed, you just don't have an issue with, and is this concept of, as we're raised, we're taught to put all of our feelings about ourselves and our value in other people's opinions. And it seems like you've just not, you don't think that way at all. You've not cared what people thought. You've always been so authentic throughout your journey. I was curious if you could just speak on that. Have you always been that way, or is that something you've had to work on?
Well, so I had pretty traumatic childhood in a lot of ways. Not sexual or physical abuse, but just a lot of loneliness and a lot of abandonment. And I always tell people that my parents gave me 2 things. They gave me a really cool name. Like Tucker Max is my actual real name. Right?
Yeah.
Right. And they were so bad at being parents. They didn't mix in any love with the bad parenting, right? And like in a lot of ways, I feel like the people that have it the worst are the ones who, if you have great parents, that's awesome, that's amazing, right? And if you have a bad parents, that's not so great. But I actually think it's better to have bad parents who you can identify as being bad parents than having parents who mix in love with the bad parenting. Right. And I don't mean imperfect parents, because all parents are imperfect, right? I'm talking about like abusive, like if they're really abusive, but they mix in just enough love that you conflate love and abuse, right? And my parents were they weren't bad people. They were just really bad at being parents. And so I learned just almost intuitively, I had to, at a very young age, that the adults were not coming to save me.
Wow.
And that and that they didn't know what they were doing. My parents were so messed up that it was easy for me to see at a young age that they were just like, they didn't know what the hell was going on, right? And so as I grew up, I didn't expect adults to know what the hell was going on. And I didn't expect them to come save me. And I didn't expect them, I didn't care about their opinions, because all the adults close to me were so screwed up and had such worthless opinions. And I'm like, okay, I don't need to worry about what they think, because I know I've seen behind the curtain, and I know that there's like I'll give you a really good, my wife, her mom my mom was in most ways a really good mom. But one of the things that my mother-in-law did with when she was younger, when my wife was very young, was really talk about how much, oh well, what will other people think, right?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
so whereas like my parents never, they may have said that, but I'm like it never entered into my mind that I needed to care about this. So it's like they were so screwed up. It's like I just learned early on, okay, I don't have to care what anyone else thinks, and no one else knows what they're doing. So I'll just go do my thing.
That is such an interesting perspective because so many people, they grow up thinking this is the way it is and I have to care. And you just had that traumatic, that actually ties in. You had a quote. I'm going to pull it up here. It was so good on your Instagram. It says, lesson I've learned, if I see trauma as there to help me grow, then it does. If I see it as a wound, that's what it becomes. My relationship to trauma is a story. I can choose the wound story or another. And it's because so many people could see that and be like, oh, my parents were horrible. Like, this is why I'm messed up. But you're like, well, shit, that actually is why I don't care what people think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so here's the thing. You don't get to pick. So a lot of people misinterpret that quote. You don't get to pick your facts, right? Like, my parents did certain things to me. They left me alone for long periods. They weren't there in the way that I needed, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't get to pick that, right? I don't get to create a fantasy in my head about who my dad was actually Mr. Rogers or whatever. Like, that didn't happen, right?
Right.
But I get to choose what story I tell myself about those facts, right? That's the key thing. And so, like, it's not Pollyanna. Like, I'm not being like, no, everything in my childhood was great. No, man, like, if I want to get past my trauma, and if you've done plant medicine, you understand this. If I want to get past my trauma, the only way past it is through it. You have got to feel that, and then you've got to let that go. But like, it's easy to get stuck in that. And
I lived in the victim mindset, so I get it for many years. Yeah.
Right. And so the people that get stuck are the ones that's their mindset. This was done to me. I am a passive recipient of my life instead of I am an active creator of what my life is. I mean, the same trauma, you can be a hero or a victim, you choose.
Yeah. Dude, that's powerful. So something else I love that you said too, I think it was the Art of Charm podcast. They asked a question and your response was just bomb. And it was so important to that they said something like, how did you go from boy to man? And you were like, well, no, that's not the case. Like, that time, that was who I authentically was. And that was necessary for all my growth. Like, those things you go through, I had to do that, and that's who I was. And it's not like there was this transition. It's just those lessons were all necessary for me, and that's who I was. And now I'm just someone different now. I love that. And I was from your 20s to where you are now. And, if you could think of like a couple big lessons you pulled out of your 20s that have been instrumental for you now looking back, could you tell me what a couple of those would be?
Oh man, my 20s.
Because man, you rose, you just shot up, and so many people that would have just rocked. But you managed that so well. It seemed like.
Yeah, I mean, don't compare your inside to my outside.
Yeah,
and don't assume that my outside reflects my inside.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
That's probably not a lesson I learned in my 20s. It's probably a lesson I really learned in my 30s. But that's a big one, man. Like, that's a big lesson that I learned from fame, was how screwed up everyone in that game was, and how corrupt and dysfunctional and toxic every piece of that game was. It was like, you think you understand from the outside, but you don't really understand until you get into it, like how awful almost all parts of it are. And I honestly don't think that I managed it very well. And I think that was actually the lesson I had to learn. I mean, we'll see, man, because I'm only 44.
Right.
But I feel like that my biggest notoriety and that my most significant fame has yet to come. And it appears to me now, and I could be wrong, man, you never know, right? But it appears to me now that my first kind of set of my career was essentially training for the second set, right? And that I had to learn all of the lessons of fame, and I had to make all of the mistakes, because like the saying, an idiot repeats their mistakes, a smart man learns from his mistakes, but a wise man learns from the mistakes of others. I wasn't wise in my 20s and 30s. I didn't learn from other people's mistakes. And every mistake that I made, someone told me was coming. And usually, even in a kind way, if I had been in the right emotional space, I knew, I was told this was coming, and I could have avoided it. But I wasn't. I hadn't worked through any of my trauma, any of my stuff. And so my first shot up the charts was really almost a reaction against all my stuff, right? And that's why so many people find it hard to stay on top once they get there, because what got them there was dysfunction, and dysfunction pushes you over. Wow. And so I feel like what I've done since, is integrate all those lessons, not just from fame, but from, I had to go back through all of my trauma. I still am, and I still have a few more really big pieces to go. The healing will never end, but at some point it becomes more enlightenment than it is healing on a medicine journey. Yes. And for me, it's still mainly healing, although I feel like I may have gone through the biggest bulk. I'm not sure. But it's definitely, whatever it is, I'm still predominantly healing. When that phase shifts from predominantly healing to predominantly enlightenment, or mind expansion, whatever you want to call it, I don't mean enlightenment in a Buddhist sense, then I think I'm going to end up becoming way more famous than I was the first time around. But this time, I'll be ready to manage it properly. I'll be humble. I'll understand that I am just a vessel for a message, and the message isn't me.
That's it. I got crazy. That's it.
I'll understand sort of how to manage ego, how to work with it. I'll hopefully have left all my narcissism behind, all that sort of stuff. And so that's the way I see it now.
Dude, you're in such a awesome, I'm like genuinely excited for your story, because you're in such a cool part of it. You know, the impact, I'm all about impact, and the impact, like you said it yourself, the impact you can have, that can be massive when you're on this journey, which kind of segues perfect into the trauma. So, so a huge part of your trauma was just neglect and just lack of love as a child, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And when did you feel it started affecting you? When did you start like feeling the effects of it, would you say?
If I had been awake, I would have started feeling the effects right away.
Yeah, yeah.
But as a kid, it's hard to do that, man. As a kid, abandoned children can't usually do anything except push that emotion down in a way to survive, because they have no empathic witnesses. They have no way, they don't have the skills or the ability to work through that, right? And so so then you grow up, and I didn't have to work through a lot of busting my parents' narrative, because like I said, they never pretended they were great. You know, most people who have terrible parents, a huge part of their journey is unpacking the lie that their parents have hoisted on them. So my parents never dumped those lies on me, or if they did, they were very small.
Yeah.
And so they were really easy to shed. So I think if you actually go read my books again, I wrote them from approximately like 27 to 31, 32 are the bulk. Actually, 27 to 34 are the bulk. Pretty much all of it, so between those periods. And if you even look the first, like I Hope This or Beer and Hell, which I wrote mainly in age 29 or so, about half at 27, 28, 29. You can see all the underlying jokes and pain. It's all there. And it's actually not far from the surface. It's like, it's not the first or second level of commentary, but it's a clear third level of commentary. It's the stuff where I'm like, look, like, I know this is fucked up. I know I'm messed up. I know I'm in pain, but I'm not going to deal with it right now. I'm dealing with it this way that I know is not working, but it's too fun. It reminds me of the St. Augustine quote, dear Lord, give me chastity and continence, but not yet, you know? Like when
Right.
I was going through that phase, that's kind of where I was, right?
Yeah.
But I was mildly self-aware in a joking way about it. But I dude, at no point did I stop and feel anything at
Yeah.
all in
Yeah.
any stretch. I couldn't, because if I had, the whole house of cards would have collapsed.
Right.
Wow. That's awesome, man. I get that, Megan. All the childhood trauma she went through was suppressed for years, and like over 30 years of just all these after effects from it.
And boy, did I feel it.
Oh man, ayahuasca was it was like a holy sci-fi movie, man.
Yeah.
So when you took the steps to start healing before the story with the shaman, before the MDMA based therapy, what did you try, like from a Western medicine perspective? What did you try, and then why did it work? Did it not work?
Yeah. So I started with, well, okay. So the day I knew I was going to have to go get help was the day that my movie came out, and I realized it wasn't going to do well. It was going to bomb, and that kind of cracked my grandiosity. I knew that day I was going to have to start doing stuff, but it took me a long time. And the first things I focused on, of course, were external things.
For sure.
Right? I got in immaculate shape, 8% body fat. I was ripped. Like everything in my life was perfect. Money set up. Like I had everything fine externally, right?
Yeah.
And then I was still, pretty miserable. Better than before, but still pretty miserable. And so it's like, okay, this isn't working. So what, and then I, made a bunch of money and other things that didn't make me happy. I did none of that made me happy. Eventually I was like, okay, if everything external is working and I'm not happy, then the only thing left is me. And so I started psychotherapy, like talk therapy. And I started psychoanalysis, which is just like a specific form of talk therapy. And I went intense, man. I was going 4 days a week for 4 years. Like I was, like I packed a lot in. And I tried everything else, man. Yoga, whatever, chanting, all that nonsense. None of it worked. Nothing against any of these therapeutic modalities, because some of them work wonders for people, but like EMDR did nothing for me. There were not. And therapy, talk therapy was really good. I had to go through about 10, 20 therapists before I found a good one. But once I found one, the thing she enabled me to get was a map of my emotions and my mind. And a map's really important. The problem was where she wasn't able to get me because I just wasn't ready. I wasn't willing to do it. So it's not really her fault, it's mine. I still wasn't feeling any of it, right? So the analogy I use is a map of Manhattan is really useful, but it's not the experience of walking the island of Manhattan. Like there's no map that can tell you what it's like to walk the island.
Yeah.
It's just a map, right?
Yep.
And so that's what talk therapy was, a map. But maps, listen, if you get dropped into Manhattan with no map, it's really you get lost and disorienting. So you kind of need both, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so talk therapy was fantastic for me. The final year of it, I started meditating with it, and that actually accelerated my growth a lot. And I ended up stopping talk therapy because it was working so well along with meditation. And then I kind of stopped meditation, I think because I was starting to get deep emotionally, and I just wasn't willing or ready to kind of dive into it. Then I met this energy worker, and I worked with her for a while. And she was pretty good at the beginning, and then got less and less effective until she was not that effective. Then I tried a bunch of other stuff and nothing worked. And then I had friends of mine, pretty famous ones, some of them, who had been telling me for years to do plant medicines.
Yes.
And I was resistant. I can remember intellectually the conversations, but like I just was not hearing them. And there was one other person I know pretty well, whose name you would know, who talks about ayahuasca all the time. And I know him really well. And I'm like, dude, you are fucked up, man. Like you are so fucked up that if you told me to eat, I would starve. So I'm not doing ayahuasca.
So that just tainted ayahuasca like crazy for you.
It did. I still haven't done ayahuasca.
Okay,
right?
totally.
But like eventually, a guy we did a book called Trust, Surrender, Receive, which is on Amazon, and written by this woman, Ann Other, which is obviously a pseudonym. But she's an MDMA assisted therapist. Like she does this. She's been guiding people for decades, and did this book, case studies of a bunch of her clients. The guy who worked on the book in my company did a therapy with her and loved it, and would not, like, he didn't brag about it, or he didn't yell about it. He did the exact right thing. He just lived the change, and I could see the change in him.
And you're like,
And
he's
I
not
was
crazy, so.
right. I know him really well, but
Right.
like the thing that so many people do wrong, they'll do 1 or 2 sessions and they won't shut up about plant medicine, which is bad for 2 reasons. One, because they probably haven't done their work. They've just started it.
Yeah.
But also because anytime someone's trying to push something on you, it means they're either trying to sell you something or they're insecure about their decision, right? And so the immediate like reaction is, okay, you're trying to sell me this, I don't want it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so he wasn't doing that. I just saw the difference, and I was like, this is all from MDMA. He's like, yeah, man. And I was like, all right, I'm in. And so set up a session with Ann. And man, I don't know if you guys have done MDMA therapy, but dude, not the second I took the medicine, obviously it takes about 45 minutes, but the second it hit, I think it was about 10 or 15 minutes after the second dose. So call it an hour 15, hour and a half in, it hit. And I was just like, oh man. Like, I mean, like I wrote about it in my piece. If any of your listeners just Google Tucker Max MDMA, and I wrote a big long piece
It's a
about
great write-up. Yeah.
my first 2 sessions. And I mean, I felt the deepest love of her. I didn't know I could feel emotions like that. And I felt they all came, the positive ones first. And then, like, of course I went into defensive mode and I was like talking and all this, but then once I got recentered, my guides and my wife recentered me, and dude, then all the trauma started coming up. And for me, it doesn't come up intellectually. I think either my brain won't let me see it intellectually, or it was all so young and so pre-verbal that it doesn't code that way. I don't know the answer, but most of it was somatic. So meaning like I was shaking. I imagine like a seizure, but like a very slow, lazy seizure, right?
Wow.
I mean, I was shaking legs, arms, mostly legs and arms, not like my full body,
Right.
just legs and arms, just shaking, just like this, right? Over and
Whoa.
over. It was all this, and sweating. My God, man, I looked like I'd been caught in the rain at the end of the thing. And that was just my first session. The second one was 10 times more intense because I knew what was coming, because I surrendered more to it. I let this stuff come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was also it was, yeah, dude, it was super intense. So it took me about 5 MDMA sessions to get through just the somatic release, man. Like I had way more trauma than I realized.
Wow.
And like I knew it, but again, that's a map versus territory, right? Like you see a map of Manhattan, you don't realize how long that island is. You can walk forever to be at the top, right? It's 190 blocks or whatever. So I had no idea how much trauma I had. So 4 or 5 sessions. By the 5th session, it was weird. It just stopped, like right in the middle of the session. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, then I was like all white, which I thought meant I was through my trauma. That was a year ago. Come to find out, what that meant was my ego had stopped there and would not let me go any deeper.
Wow.
Right? Because I've subsequently gone substantially deeper. I had a lot more trauma beneath that. But the cool thing about MDMA is that it's your friend, right? So it's soft and gentle. And so that's why it's the best place to start for almost everybody. But, there's some exceptions if you're on SSRIs or whatever, et cetera. But MDMA is the best place for most people to start. The problem with MDMA is that it's your friend. That, like, if you have a strong ego structure like I do, like you can basically fight it, right? And so, even though I was telling myself I was surrendering, to a point I was, and then there came a point when my ego was like, no more. And so then I went back, all the friends of mine who've been telling me I should do this for a while, they were pretty well connected in the underground plant medicine scene. I got connected into some very sophisticated, very skilled people in this scene. And so I've, like kind of mentors of mine. And so they've kind of helped me progress. From there, I found a mushroom shaman who does just mushrooms, trained with the Mazatec Indians. Like this dude really understands. He got to know me well. We got to know each other, and did a mushroom session. And it took 8.5 grams for me to break through my ego.
Heroic trip, man.
Oh, dude, that's
That's
way
a
more.
heroic. Yeah, that's
No,
way
no.
more.
Hero dose is 5.
5.
A heroin dose is 7.5. I did 8.5. And he
Cool.
said that wasn't even the worst, man. He's like, I've had people had to go to 13. They're like, I'm like,
Oh
seriously?
my God.
I
How
know,
was
right?
the moon?
Dude, seriously, it was crazy, man. Like, I don't really even talk about what happened in that trip because unless you've done psychedelics, everything I'm gonna say just sounds crazy.
Absolutely.
It does.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Absolutely.
it's just, you're talking nonsense. It's like talking about sex with a virgin. It's a total waste of time. So nonetheless, I had an extraordinarily profound spiritual experience that reorganized my whole worldview on
Love
almost
that.
everything. And so then after that, I did several mushroom sessions, but I went way down. I was generally, my working dose now is 3 to 3.5 grams.
Still freaking solid.
Once you kill the ego with mushrooms, not that my ego's gone, just meaning once you break through, then it takes much lower doses to get similar effects. So after a while, it's not that mushrooms weren't good. It's just that they do a certain thing well. But another person who knows me well recommended that I try LSD. And again, obviously therapeutically, like, I don't know how people do this shit and go to concerts and stuff, man. That's like mind blowing to me doing this recreationally. But I did an LSD, I combined LSD and MDMA, with a guy who knows what he's doing. And it was not much LSD. It was like 100 or 150 micrograms of LSD, which is a fairly small amount. And that with a normal amount of MDMA, like 180 milligrams. And dude, it was the most intense thing I have ever felt to that point. It was more intense than the 8.5 grams of mushrooms. Because LSD is no joke, man. LSD is like, it rips the veneer off of reality and it shoves reality in your face. And I love that, except, man, it's intense, dude.
Yeah.
It is no joke.
Yeah.
And so then I did about 2 or 3 of those sessions. And then I hit the mother load, man. I got to a point where, like, ego still for me, because my ego and my identity were so wrapped up, because that was my defense as a kid, was most people identify with their parents. I identified with myself. So my ego. And so I did a ketamine session, and ketamine will kill. If ketamine doesn't kill your ego, nothing can, because that's dissociative. It's what it does. Dude, It was the craziest thing, man. I did the ketamine, right? And things go pixelated, and then black and white, and then pure black. And you get cold. You feel like you're going down an underground river. And I wasn't quite going into a K-hole, but I know why people call it that, right?
Right.
It makes sense. So, dude, I thought it was me. I heard these 4 things in my head. They tricked you. This is your new reality. You can't leave. You're gonna die.
Oh, God.
And I was like, what the fuck? Right? But I had a very good guide, different guide than the very good guide, who specializes in this. It was ketamine and a few other medicines, but ketamine was the main one. And I'd been practicing letting go and surrender. There's a book called Letting Go by David Hawkins, which if you have not read, I would highly recommend. It's basically been my guide for psychedelics, for plant medicines, is letting go. It's not about that at all. It's just kind of how he recommends approaching emotions. And so I'm like, I'm going to surrender and let go. And I did. And it was crazy intense. And then I came out, man, and I had like the strongest somatic release I've ever had. All kinds of shit that, like, it broke through my ego. And it took me a couple days to realize that wasn't me saying that. That was my ego.
Whoa.
Because my ego has convinced me that it's me, right? And so that's why, and your ego's job is to keep you safe. And the main way it keeps you safe is keeping you the same, right? And that's why, like, it was like, it's telling me I'm going to die because it was dying.
Right.
And so it assumes it's me, but it's not me. It's just a piece of me. And it's an important piece of me. But what psychedelics do, what they can do, is they repress, or they kill or cleave off that part so that the full you can come up, right? And then when you exactly. And then, of course, your ego comes back to some way, but it's never the same. and it's always weaker. And now you have an opportunity to kind of rebuild the self with an ego in a proper, healthy place, as opposed to dominating who you are, which if you have trauma, it's almost always like an egoic response is one of the ways that even if you're very passive and you let people use you in a weird way, that's your ego. That's a narcissistic response, which I can explain later. Anyway, so I did that. That was the last thing I've done. That was about 3 months ago.
Wow.
And that was so powerful. I've done almost nothing since then. The other thing I've done now, because I have a whole integration practice. I have a dude I talk to once a month, who's like this guy, Philip McKernan. You might have heard of him. He's like a probably the best mindset like type coach. I talk to him once a month, and then I see an energy worker, this woman, Christina Allen, in Austin, at the Austin Shamanic Center.
Oh, cool.
She's incredibly powerful. I mean, like, she does energy work, not medicine work, right?
Yep.
But I consider like talk therapy and energy work with a good energy worker as essentially a part of what's called integration. So what most people who are now experimenting with psychedelics are not really understanding that the psychedelics don't do any of your work for you. Yep. They just open you up and they create a space for you to do more work. And then I also go to an acupuncturist, Cindy Nilsson, at Alive and Well. Those are my kind of, along with, you know, I work out, I eat well, I sleep 8 hours a night. I meditate, I do those things, because like all these medicines do is give you the opportunity to get to know yourself, to learn about yourself, and to help yourself heal so that you can become the person you want to be.
Dude, there's so many things to that. First off, so I had I lived in New York City. I was doing medical sales, and my big thing was binge drinking. I was a big time partier up there, party promoting, binge drinking, and binge drinking was always my issue. I tried all of society's ways. Nothing worked. LSD changed the game for me. LSD was instrumental in, I had this crazy trip one time where I went inside my head, saw my addiction, and like had kind of a fight with it, and then deeply realized it was this powerful escape I was using. And anyway, nothing in society work. LSD gave me the opportunity to rewire my mind. Then meditation, affirmations, all the integration work you're talking about was essential. LSD was a game changer for me. It's interesting because people are getting to the point where they've tried everything else. So they're trying these alternative medicines, just like you mentioned. And I love everything you said, because something I'm so passionate about is trying to destroy the stigma around psychedelics, the stigma around these alternative medicines.
So let me ask you, you know what AA is, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know, it's 12 steps, right?
Yep.
Do you know what? There were supposed to be 13.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So there's a whole book about this. Do you know what the 13th step was?
I don't.
LSD.
Shut up. What?
I'm serious. Go look it up.
I know this. Wow. No, I believe you. That's amazing. I didn't.
Google Bill W. LSD.
That's amazing.
He kicked alcoholism with LSD.
What? That's mind-blowing for me.
The board of directors of AA ended up deciding to cut that off of the steps. This is not a debatable, this is not like some conspiracy theory. You can find all, like, it's on Wikipedia, it's everywhere else. It's like, LSD.
The crazy thing is, too, not to go off a different tangent, but dude, for years now, my family doesn't talk to me because I turned to psychedelics, even though like the alcoholism's gone. I haven't drank in years now, but because of that stigma, I had no idea. That's crazy. Also, man, you know, on another time, I'd love to connect. You may already know him. Have you heard of Michael Zappelin? Zappy. So he's the filmmaker for Reality of Truth. It's an ayahuasca documentary. Him and Jerry Powell. Jerry Powell's the CEO of Rhythmia. It's like the largest ayahuasca.
I know Rhythmia, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a movement right now around ketamine, and Michael Zappelin's like he got rich because he bought like beer.com for $80,000, sold it for like $8 million, and then he made all this money and then found he was still unhappy, found ayahuasca, and then years later his journeys led him to ketamine, and he's on a movement right now to cut suicide by 75%. And he thinks the key with that is ketamine. So he has this whole movement now where he's getting all these players together to help fund ketamine for starting with veterans, but other people too that need it. So it's so interesting you say ketamine. That's something we actually didn't have knowledge about until we got connected with Michael Zappelin, and we're interviewing Jerry from the Arrhythmia in a bit, but it's so interesting. Ketamine came up
That's
again.
what I'm gonna try next, because like you said, I got a lot of healing in 2 nights, but there's a lot of layers, and so
Yeah. So hold on. Have you only done ayahuasca?
oh no, I've done mushrooms,
bunch of psychedelics.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just tell you guys, in my experience, I've been in this journey about 18 months, right? So I'm a baby at this, and I just, through weird sets of coincidences, I know a lot of the players, like the real players who've been doing this 20, 30 years, 40 years, some of them, right? And this is one of those things where it's amazing that you guys, I agreed to come on your podcast, obviously. It's amazing that you guys want to talk about this, and I think more people should talk about this. I'll just tell you, in my experience, the best thing to do is never, ever try and persuade anyone to do this, and never tell anyone, even in a broad sense, everyone should do this. No, never.
No, it's
right.
Yeah.
The best thing you can do, though, is talk about your own experience, just open and honest. And even when you're like places like, okay, like say I'm on my journey. I'm only 18 months in, but and I talk about it that way. I don't act like I'm some expert. I don't pretend that I know everything. And that actually, I don't know, but for sure. But I would estimate that there's been hundreds of people who have started on this journey because of me, not because I told them to, though. They've started on it because they knew who I was. They understand, they had an idea of who I was, right? Even if they don't know me directly. Although plenty of them know me directly. But then they saw the changes in me, and it was like, what they thought was, fuck, that's what I want. What I want is what he has gotten.
So authentic. It's
right?
It's
But the only way you can do it, if you try and sell this stuff, first off, it sounds ridiculous and fantastical, right? Because it's like, come on, I'm gonna go talk to machine elves. Fuck off.
Right,
this is
right.
bullshit, right?
No, that's
right.
Of
course.
very specific and right.
It tells you where I've been on some of these journeys, right?
Right.
But then beyond that, beyond that, it sounds too good to be true.
Yeah.
But most important, the people that it will attract, the ones who will do it because they're like, well, he told me I should, are not ready.
Yes.
They're not ready, dude. I could have done this easily 5 years before I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like, I had people I knew and trusted telling me, yeah, you should consider this, right? And I remember I couldn't, like, it's the weirdest thing. I remember the conversations, and I can't recall emotionally connect. It's like it was like the teacher and Charlie Brown, wah, 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 wah,
Yeah.
right? And the reason is because I wasn't ready. And I'll tell you, dude, like I have seen this mistake firsthand. One of my best friends, I didn't push him. I didn't think I was trying, like, persuading him or anything like that, but he ended up doing MDMA because of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, I knew he needed it, and he did, and I knew it would help him, and it would, and I felt like he was ready. And so, like, I just made it real easy on him and kind of set up the day, let's do this. Like, I didn't put any obstacles in the way, even small ones, right?
Yep.
And so, and I was there with the sitter. Had I not been there, he would have broken the door down and ran home. And, like, this was 20 miles away from his house. Like, he wasn't ready. He had, like he's fine. It was not a true worst case scenario. He didn't have a mental break or anything, but, like, it brought up a lot of stuff that he was not ready for. And it was bad, dude. And like, I had to use, me and the guide had to use every piece of skill we had. I had to use my relationship with him, and the guide had to use all his skill to keep him centered and get him through that, right?
That's scary.
And it was not the medicine that gave him a bad trip, but that's the definition of a bad trip, is when things come up that you're not ready for.
Yes.
If you go to the medicine saying, okay, I'm ready to start my healing, I'm ready to face some stuff, then you have gone in, it's voluntarily, and it's a totally different orientation than if you're just, oh, well, it sounds cool, other people are doing it, my buddy told me I should do it. Then
Right.
it's a fucking shitstorm that you are not ready for, man.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's always what I tell people. Like, okay, I'll get, like, I don't, refer everybody, but like friends of mine who come to me who want to find a guy, then a lot of times, like I'll talk to them first, and if I feel like they're ready, then I don't even ever say. I make them say, okay, what are next steps? I make them ask me for the info.
Yeah.
Right? I never offer, and I never send without an ask. But I don't connect them to guys I know. Like, I know guys all around the country. I don't connect them. I say, they say, okay, I definitely want a guide, and if I think they're ready, then I will send them the email and I'll say, you reach out.
Right.
And then I'll give them the code words too. Like, you tell them I sent you, tell them you're asking for this specific thing, and they'll know what you're asking for. And then, so they've got to send the email, and then they got to set up the call with the guy. They got to get on with the guy. So it's not a big barrier, but it's enough that they've got to consciously multiple times make a decision. Awesome. I am initiating my healing journey. Because if people don't do that, I have seen it over and over, man. Not just my friend. There's a couple other times. If they don't initiate their healing journey, it's not going to be very effective. Best case scenario. Worst case scenario, a real fucking shitstorm happens. Yeah. And like, the last thing anyone wants right now is people doing this work that aren't ready, because it's still mostly underground. Yes. And there's still the integration and the support systems mostly have not been built, that will be once it's legalized.
Need to so much. Yeah.
And the worst fucking thing that could happen is all these fucking people losing their fucking minds because they aren't ready.
Right.
Dude, that's I appreciate that.
I do appreciate that, because I'm actually dealing with this, so it's really ironic that you're telling me this.
Really ironic.
Just this morning, I have a friend that, man, she needs it, like, she needs healing, but she's not ready, and like, I needed to hear this. So dude, thank you.
I really appreciate this. Is it's crazy synchronistic you're saying this, because our movement's blowing up over it. And it's just, this is so synchronistic. I don't push it on people, but like with her, I felt like I wanted to. I love that barrier thing. That's such a genius move.
Yeah. No, let me tell you, seriously, listen to this. This is because I learned this the hard way, and thankfully it was not that hard of a lesson. No one got hurt. What's funny is my friend a year later has come back around, and now he came, he's like, I want to do it. I made him ask me 3 times.
You're like, hold on, buddy.
Yeah. No, but I didn't even tell him. That. I just said, he's like, I think I'm ready. I'm like, cool, that's excellent. I'm happy for you. And then he didn't bring it up. And then he came back, he's like, Tucker, I think maybe it's time. I'm like, oh, awesome, man. I'm really glad that this has worked out for you. Like, cool. No, seriously. And then the third time he's like, all right, dude, I want to set a date. Let's actually do it. I'm like, okay, all right. That's what I wanted to hear, right? And no, because seriously, I made him really, because like, I'm not going to make the same mistake. But you can't, I think this is actually, as messed up as AA can be in some ways, this is a saying that I think they have. You can't not drink for anyone else. You know? Yeah. You can't do anyone else's work for them.
I know.
And like, it's a testament to, like how caring you are, that you really want to help people. But it is also narcissism and ego to push this on other people. Right. Because I've seen, I know in me, when I find myself pushing this on someone, it's almost always because there is something about them that it reminds me of some healing I haven't done. Ooh. And so I'm like, oh, interesting. All right, I'm pushing this on her because she reminds me of this part of me. I need to go work on my shit.
Dude, that's the enlightenment. That's such a powerful piece of the enlightenment you're talking about, man.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah, just understand that trying to push this on other people is you projecting your lack of healing on them.
Yeah,
even if
good. My mentor says that all the time.
Your mentor's right.
Good. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's so good. And it's crazy. It's a picture in my mind now. I literally remember leaving our ceremony and the shaman's like, hey, something I'm going to tell you about where I messed up. when I first started discovering this years and years ago, I would like tell people about it. They would have a horrible experience. It has to call to them in a certain way. So that's
why I haven't done ayahuasca.
Yeah.
Seriously, like
That's smart,
it's not,
yeah.
I've never felt the call. I'm not gonna do it just because I think I'm supposed to, you know?
Yeah. Oh, it ain't fun, so.
So what are you doing now, man? I mean, I know you just had that recent experience. What are you for healing modalities? Where are you at now? Where do you feel like
so the only constant in my life is integration, right? All the things. So, you know, twice a month, you know, to my energy worker, Christina, once a month talking to my guy, you know, like working out. I do MMA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu workout, sleeping, cold tubs. Like I go to sauna, float tank twice a week. Like I do a lot of shit because I'm really trying to like get this right. And so I'm testing a lot of things, seeing, you know, what's best. But the things that are absolute always energy worker, talk therapy, lots of sleep, eating well, and working out. Those 5 never change, right?
Nice.
In terms of medicine, I'm honestly not sure right now. I actually am talking to one of my main mentors next week. He's going to be in Austin for something else. And so we're going to sit down and see what medicine may make sense. But I'll tell you, probably I'm going to do 1 or 2 more sessions with, I found both mushrooms and LSD to be amazing tools. And those tools, depending on dosage, are just fantastic. And I think I have probably a couple more rounds, especially LSD combined with MDMA is really just a fantastic way to go deep, but to heal what comes up. I'll tell you the next like level up medicine that I'm going to go to. I'm almost positive it's going to be 5-MeO DMT.
That's what I did.
What healed her.
That's what gave me the healing. Like
it was mixed
like 70%. But I'm talking went deep, and it was terrifying, and I was convulsed. It looked like I was having a seizure, like you were talking about. Like I was listening to you, and I was like, oh my god, yes.
That was trauma coming out. So I'm trying to get through most of my trauma before I do 5-MeO, because 5-MeO is a rough way to deal with trauma. Just like ayahuasca is a rough way. You can do it. Those are just very rough ways to deal with trauma.
Yes.
I would rather use them. I would rather use them to get to the final layers of ego cracking and the final deep layers of facing my shadow and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to like the higher level. If I can clear it out with mushrooms and LSD and MDMA, I'm going to clear it out with that stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we're going back in April to do 3 more ceremonies, and I'm like, I'm hoping at this point
she got about 70%
I'm hoping
healing.
I got,
still a little bit there.
I'd love to get like clarity and things like that, but man, she kicked my ass for sure, but in a good way. In a great way.
The last thing I'll ask you real quick, because we ask every person this, is if you could leave the world with one message, what would it be?
I don't have anything better than the same thing that Jesus and Buddha said. Everything you need is inside of you.
Oh, I love that.
Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within, and Buddha said all you need you have. I can't improve on that message.
Dude, and I love that, because that's another freaking insane conditioning thing that we've been rocked with this, because both of our families, not down talking them. If it works for them, that's great. Right. But so many people are conditioned for this control, fear-based thing. So I love that you said that, because it's all within. It's not a freaking white bearded man in the sky. It's within.
I mean, it's in the fucking Bible. The kingdom of heaven is within. Dude, I'm telling you, man, like it's funny. I wasn't I was atheist. And after the first mushroom session, I'm like, I got to reconsider that.
I love that.
And then after the first LSD session, it was like, oh, of course. I like, obviously God exists. I'm not sure the religious conception is right, but like conceive of God as an all-pervasive energy of love. Absolutely, no doubt.
Right.
And the funny thing is, it showed you the same. Just like, dude, you already know this. You read, because I read the Bible in college in my healing class. This is what the kingdom of heaven is within means, and I'm like, oh fuck!
It's always been.
I had no idea what he was talking about, and now it makes total sense.
And there's plant medicine in the Bible. There's plant medicine in the Bible.
Yeah,
we have scripture in our book that we're talking to Scribe about. There's plant medicine in the Bible.
if you guys want to see something crazy, go read. There's a book called Food of the Gods by Terence McKenna.
I love
Oh.
Terrence McKenna.
So have you read Food of the Gods?
I haven't, but I know the concept, but I love Terrence McKenna. Yep.
Food of the Gods is the argument, Terrence McKenna's argument. He calls it the stoned ape hypothesis.
Yes.
That psilocybin is what basically made us human. Like I understand I know anthropology and physics really well. I read that and I was like, fuck, man. Like, I'm not sold this is absolutely the case, but it's an extraordinarily strong case, man.
Right. Yeah, Michael Zappelin in his Reality and Truth film, he wrote a book with Deepak Chopra, and he was talking about how his whole argument is that there's psychedelics right there in the Bible. Like, they're in there. Yeah. But anyway, man, we'll go ahead and stop it there. Thank you again so much for coming on, man. I truly appreciate it. It's been so cool talking with you.
But it works. Be the change that you want to see in the world. Don't lecture about the change.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yes, I love that.
Thanks so much, Tucker. Just awesome. Dude, thanks so much for everything, man. Have a great day.
Of course. See you guys.
See you, man.